Fans, and welcome to Spring into Sports Beat. I'm your host, Eddie Fitzgerald, and Hoops fans, do we have a show for you? The NBA is in full swing, the Sweet 16 is set, and Hofstra Basketball is on a quest to get back to the big dance. We have all that and the return of a fan-favorite segment, Facetimes. Let's get it started, Hofstra fans. This spring-themed episode of Sports Beat starts right now. Call your therapist, get your calendars, folks. March is here. Let the madness ensue. Thank you for tuning in to this special basketball-centric episode. Joining me on the panel today is sports editor of the Hofstra Chronicle, Mike Senatore. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing great, Eddie. Ready to talk some hoops.
And from 88.7 FM is the producer of the college hoop show, The Baseline, Blake Waldron. Blake, how you doing, man?
Doing good. What's up, guys? Happy to be here.
Well, let's not dilly-dally any longer because we have a jam-packed show. Let's just jump into it. A big surprise coming out of the women's tournament. Hofstra upsetting Towson in overtime, topping Kiana Jeter and the Tigers. What did you take away from that game, that special first CAA conference win for the first time in a couple years for the Pride?
I think the biggest difference maker in that game was the energy and aggressiveness that the Pride played with for all 45 minutes. They started out on a 12-3 run to open the game, and that allowed them to maintain the lead for the entirety of the first half. Towson was a tough team to keep down, though, and they showed that by tying the game and eventually taking the lead in the fourth quarter. The key for the Pride was stringing together a number of well-executed plays on offense, and they did just that in the fourth quarter, hitting 3 shots back-to-back-to-back to keep them in the game, and once they got to overtime, they stayed in the driver's seat.
Now, Eddie, the Pride lost to Towson twice in the regular season. But to have this game, one of those losses, by the way, was by 28 points. To have this game to kind of avenge those losses was so big for them. Joshani Knight starting out the game with a steal and a layup really brought the energy up for the team. Jalen Hines with a double-double, 14 points, 14 rebounds. Caleb Brown with 28 points of her own. Just an all-around great effort for the Pride.
And another year under the belt for head coach GSA, Daniel Santos Atkinson. What would be your grade? What would you assess year number 2 under the Santos-Atkinson regime? Mike, we'll start with you.
I think Coach Santos-Atkinson she deserves a lot of credit for what this team was able to do this season. We saw the Pride improve on both points per game and points allowed per game compared to the painful 2019 to 2020 season, and a lot of that has to do with her coaching. We saw, despite the shortened season, Pride won 8 games and lost 12, good for a winning percentage of .400. That's the best they've seen since 2016 and 2017. So I think that's a testament to the way that Santos Atkinson is coaching this team. In terms of a grade, I'd give her a B+.
I'm riding with Mike here. I'm going to go with a B+. I think she did a great job of rallying the troops, having everybody buy into her message. You know, they didn't have a conference win last year. This year, they won 42% of their conference games. And now heading into year 3, she's going to have her own recruits coming into the program. It's really important for those recruits that have been believing in her in high school to come over and kind of take over the roster. And it spells a really bright future for the women's team.
And speaking of players who bought into that DSA system, players who came over with her from Pittsburgh, Jacayla Brown and Joshani Knight. Those 2 players have earned all CAA honors this season. What did you guys see from them making that transition into this season, and what do you want to see from them heading into next year?
Well, Jacayla Brown became the Pride's leading contributor in the 2021 season. She averaged 16.3 points for the Pride, and that's the most the team's seen since the 2011-2012 season. Knight also was a big contributor, leading the team in both assists and steals per game. In terms of what I'd like to see improvements on, I'd like to see Brown improve as a facilitator next season. I think that would add another dimension to the Pride's offense and allow her to become a triple threat who's able to impact the game with her passing as well as her scoring. And despite the improvements we've already seen from both of them on offense, I'd like to see jumps in both of their shooting percentages.
You mentioned shooting percentages, Mike. Jacayla Brown had a 10% jump in her field goal percentage heading into the season, and she shot 11 threes her sophomore season, 12 her freshman season. This year she shot 56, making 14. So her three-point shooting has been a really big component of her game, and I look forward to seeing that continue to evolve. For Joshani Knight, it's going to be really important for her to raise her free throw shooting percentage. She shot 59% from the line this year, and limit her turnovers. She had a few games here where she had over 5 turnovers. It's going to be important for her to get those down for the Pride to have a successful season next year.
And now let's step over to the men's side of things. Head coach Joe Mahalik stepping into a new role here at Hofstra Athletics, and that means a nationwide coaching search for the coach of the head position for the men's basketball team. What qualities should Hofstra look to bring in this next head coaching job to replace Joe Mihalik?
I think the search has to begin by looking at the defensive end. In Mihalik's last season as acting head coach, the Pride held opposing teams to just over 68 points per game. In this most recent season, without him leading the zone, that number jumped to 73 points per game. Whether or not they want to continue with the zone defense also has to factor into the decision. If they're looking to commit to that as the primary defensive formation, then it would benefit the Pride to get a coach who's well-versed in that style of play.
I think what would benefit the team most is a coach that runs an up-tempo offense. You know, you got to play for your personnel that you have now. You have David Green, Von Kramer, long, rangy, quick wings. You don't have those, stout guards before like DeJour Bowie, Justin Wright Foreman, and Jalen Ray. So it's going to be important to put an emphasis on those personnel players. And now, kind of switching to the man defense. These guys can switch 1 through 5. It's going to be really important to kind of hone in on that. And when it comes to a coaching search, it's going to be really interesting to see if they can kind of pull the player. We saw it down in Virginia Tech this year. Mike Young come over, and he brought Kevin Aluma with him. Can Hofstra pull a star player with their next coach as well?
Absolutely, and another name to keep in mind is Mike Fairley. He's now the acting head coach still for this team as the nationwide job search continues for the Pride. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back. More Sports Beat after this.
I've been in the sports industry for 25 years as a coach, worked with thousands of young athletes, and been fortunate to win multiple national championships. What truly amazes and saddens me after all these years is how many of the problems we see center around parents making youth sports unpleasant for young athletes, coaches, officials, and fans. I've recently partnered with a nonprofit company that prioritizes what is really important in youth sports: kids, conduct at games, and coach education. It's time for a change. Check out trustedcoaches.org.
Personally, art's been everything for me. I mean, I grew up as a very shy kid. I was in a shell, essentially, and artistic expression was the thing that actually made me feel confident that I had something to say and that I was allowed to say it.
And welcome back. Time to look at your busted brackets and talk some March Madness. And guys, there has been a lot of madness this season. We have a bunch of double-digit seeds in the Sweet 16. We got number 15, Oral Roberts, number 12, Oregon State, number 11, UCLA, and number 11, Cuse. They're all still dancing, fellas. And guys, out of these remaining double-digit seeds, who has the best shot of making it past the Sweet 16, past the Elite Eight, and into the Final Four?
I think for me it has to be the Syracuse Orange. I think they're the team most poised to get to the Final Four out of those 4 teams you mentioned. After eking out a win over West Virginia, their Sweet 16 matchup is against the second-seeded Houston, who just narrowly escaped being upset by Rutgers. I think if the Orange can take advantage of the weaknesses Houston showed in that game, then they'll move on to face either the 8th-seeded Ramblers of Loyola Chicago or fellow Cinderella team Oregon State. With veteran head coach Jim Boeheim at the helm, I think there's a good chance that Syracuse can get there.
Well, for me, fellas, it's got to be Houston. Houston is a great, long, perimeter, physical-based defensive team. They held Tennessee to 5 of 26 from the three-point line. When they took on Oklahoma State, they out-rebounded them 52 to 32 on the boards, a major difference. And they were able to hold Cade Cunningham in check. In the next few rounds, there's a potential there that they could face Houston. Houston's kind of only their offense runs through Quentin Grimes, similar to how Oklahoma State's offense runs through Cade Cunningham. Quentin Grimes not as good as a player as Cade Cunningham, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem for this tough Oregon State team.
And we are talking about Oregon State here, but let's talk a little bit about Gonzaga, the number 1 seed, still on a quest for a perfect season. What's the biggest obstacle for them moving forward? Is it number 5, Creighton?
I don't think so, Eddie. They've had 2 statement victories in the tournament already. Big man Drew Timme just posted a career high of 30 points in their win over Oklahoma. And with seeds 2 through 4 in that region already being knocked out of play, I think they're a shoo-in for the Final Four. The only roadblock for them, possibly the only hole in their game, could be the inconsistent play of Jalen Suggs. He shot 2 of 8 from the field and 0 for 3 on three-pointers in their first-round win over Norfolk State. And he shot just 1 for 6 on three-pointers in the second round. So if he can return to form that he was around mid-season, I think they could be virtually impossible to beat.
For me, the only obstacle is themselves. The only way that they can lose here is if they get into a cycle of looking for numbers or, hunting for similar plays like down the stretch that they like over and over again. I've really never seen a team as talented and as well coached as this team. Offensively, they run their pick and rolls. They can always find guys, shooters open in the corner. If, defense is honing in on those shooters, and there's always a guy on the low post to drop it off to. So I really think this is a well-rounded Gonzaga team, and the only way that they can lose here is if they get in their own head.
And another team that we haven't even mentioned at all has got to be the Oregon Ducks. I mean, they topped number 2 Iowa and Luka Garza. They put up 95 in that second round. They're taking on the Trojans of USC. They're underdogs here, but are they?
Well, I mean, I do think the matchup favors USC currently, but they're facing Gonzaga in the next round either way.
That's fair.
I think it's USC all the way. I think USC has a bunch of height and a bunch of strength, and I think they're a really strong potential Final Four team here with the Mobley brothers and others. It's going to be really tough for Oregon to find the capability to stop them down low.
And now mentioning a team that loves to dish out upsets, the Loyola Chicago Ramblers. They beat a lot of picks for the national champion in the Fighting Illini of Illinois. They beat them for state bragging rights, 71-58 in that second round. Are they another Final Four threat?
I definitely think they're a threat, but that region is currently up for grabs at the moment. Houston's the highest seed left, but I don't see this team as having the same sort of magic that they had in 2018. So currently I wouldn't place any bets on them going further than maybe the Final Four.
I don't really see that either. I think they probably would have lost to Georgia Tech if Moses Wright had played. I don't think they have enough shot creators to try to have that type of run. And, athletically, they're not quite there either. So you kind of want to have either the athleticism or the shot creators. Loyola has neither, so I don't think they can quite make it that far.
And Blake, you were actually in that 0.042% of people who predicted Oral Roberts over Ohio State in that first round. How did you do it? I have to know.
Well, they have 4 guys that shoot 40% from 3, and they have the highest scoring player in the nation in Max Aispis. The pick and rolls that they run up high, they get the switches that they want. Aispis is matched on the big man, and he can blow by him all day. When the defense collapses, you're going to pass it out, and you're going to hit one of those 40% shooters from 3. So it's really pick your poison. Aispis is going to finish, or they're going to knock a 3 down. They played great in their non-conference schedule against those tougher teams. So for me, it was kind of easy to see this one coming.
And now let's shift over things to the professional side. Let's talk about the NBA. Lots of stuff going on. Big trades going on. Let's start off with the P.J. Tucker acquisition for the Milwaukee Bucks. They have been red hot as of late, and now they're getting a great defender and a great three-point shooter from the big man position in P.J. Tucker. Is this team a late bloomer, Mike?
Well, after getting blown out by the Nuggets to start the month of March, the Bucks have won 7 straight games. To be fair, they benefited from a fairly easy schedule. Only 2 of those wins came against teams that were over 500. Those came against the San Antonio Spurs and the Sixers, who were without center Joel Embiid. The trade for P.J. Tucker does bolster the team's defense, and they need it. They're 19th in points allowed per game in the league. Tucker's a proven veteran with prowess on the defensive end. He gives them more versatility in their lineups, and will give them an edge on defense.
Well, the Bucks are finally matching the expectations that were set for them in the beginning of the season. They've now won 12 of their last 13, and the acquisition of Tucker gives them some interesting capabilities now. Now they can run a lineup with, Drew Holiday, DiVincenzo, Giannis, Middleton, and now Tucker, and those guys can switch 1 through 5 on any defender, and they can all shoot the 3 to some extent. Tucker gives them a lot more flexibility than they do with Lopez on the floor. Having those 5 guys is going to be a really dangerous lineup that's going to give teams in the playoffs fits for all of May and all of June.
And once again, we are talking a little bit of that NBA basketball. Let's talk about some postseason opponents for those Milwaukee Bucks. And right here in New York, the Brooklyn Nets. Now, they have not had their big 3 together for more than 10 games this season. That's James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant. Does this cause some concern for when the postseason eventually rolls around for these guys?
I do think that trio needs to see a little bit more time together on the court to build the sort of chemistry we've seen from similar superstar team-ups in recent years. But what we have seen when they've been on the court together has been very promising. Head coach Steve Nash has emphasized on multiple occasions how much he values the strategy of staggering the minutes of his players. And ever since the acquisition of James Harden, it's gotten even easier for them to do that.
I think it's actually a good thing because I think the stars in their own right can now feel out their teammates when they're kind of leading the charge. So once you get all three guys together, and they've played together throughout Team USA, growing up, AAU, all these different situations, and they're all really good friends. I think they'll be able to handle their personalities together. I think having a younger coach like Steve Nash, who they played against in the league, will help them kind of understand and weave that together. So I really think it's a good thing that they're not all playing together, because Harding can, with guys like Claxton, they can kind of mesh together and stuff. I really think it's a great opportunity for all three of the stars individually.
Almost like a chance for them all to get like individual one-on-ones of being the star player on the team, just getting those minutes together. Let's shift over to the Western Conference a little bit, fellas, because the Jazz and Suns are the top two teams in the West who nobody had picked at this point probably to be at that point. But we're past the midway point of the season now. Do you guys think this is staying chalk? Are the Suns and the Jazz here to stay for playoff time?
I think they're here to stay for the playoffs, but the team that comes out of the West is ultimately going to run through LeBron James and the Lakers. I think Chris Paul has done a fantastic job in Phoenix. He's an MVP candidate for sure, but to see how far they really will go will depend on their seeding come playoff time.
I think it comes down to the Lakers shooting. The Suns and Jazz don't have enough shot creators to kind of match up with that. The Lakers' record isn't reflective of what they are. AD missing time, LeBron missing time. Once they get those guys back, it'll be really interesting to see when the double teams come, when those rotations come to guys like LeBron and AD, if the Suns and Jazz can get over and mess up those three-point shooters, or if those three-point shooters with the Lakers can't even make enough shots. That's the big question for me here.
Well, tomorrow is the trade deadline at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is the last chance teams will have the ability to trade for players, for picks, for whatever. Lots of names have been floating around. What is the most intriguing name to you guys on the market right now?
To me, that would have to be Kyle Lowry. I think he's a proven defensive leader. I think he can step into any locker room anywhere in the NBA, and he can immediately impact and benefit the team's offense and defense. So he'd have to be the most interesting for me at the moment.
For me, I've got John Collins, a guy still in his early 20s, a guy that kind of has, he's got to get shipped out here in some respects because Clint Capella's there. They use their 6th overall pick on a Kongwu there, and he's waiting to get his chance. To kind of get Collins out of there would be good. His trade value is never going to be higher than it is right now. The Hawks really I don't think, have a future for him, so they got to ship him out now and get the best return possible for themselves.
Which team has the most to gain and which team has the most to lose at the trade deadline? Is it the team that ends up picking a Kyle Lowry who might re-sign elsewhere next season? Or is it a team like Toronto who might be able to push for the playoffs still and make some noise by trading a guy like Kyle Lowry?
I think the trade deadline is a really important time in the season where teams that might be in the middle of the playoff pack right now can really push themselves ahead. So a team like Boston, a team like Philadelphia, teams like that, they really should be taking advantage of an opportunity like this.
I think for me the answer is clearly the Celtics. I think they need to get rid of Kemba Walker. I think he doesn't fit into what they do offensively, and I think his salary, what his salary commands doesn't justify how he fits in that offense. I think he's being paid to be a number one player, and he can be that number one player somewhere else, but he doesn't fit into Boston's scheme. They need to find a defensive presence, flipping him for someone maybe like Collins would be a really good move for Boston. I would kind of shoot them upwards back in the standings, and if they don't, it could spell the end of Brad Stevens in Boston.
I mean, that's something that for most Celtics fans seems unthinkable, but, we're going to be, as all of us are, watching that trade deadline very heavily, glued to Twitter, glued to our TV screen, just waiting to see whatever player movement happens. We're going to take another short break. Well, I guess we're not. I guess we could keep a little bit going for right now. I think that there is so much to talk about. I mean, there is the trade deadline, but out of this team right now, no Joel Embiid, no LeBron James, 2 top MVP candidates out. Is James Harden now the front runner for MVP?
I wouldn't say he's the front runner. I think it all depends on the timetable for return for LeBron and Joel Embiid.
If LeBron doesn't touch the floor again, if Embiid doesn't touch the floor again, it will go to Harden. But that's not realistic. I think the word is most valuable. And I think Embiid really is the most valuable player to his team. We just talked about the impact that all 3 stars have in Brooklyn. So Harden winning that award wouldn't really make much sense to me.
And now we're going to take a short break, but stick around because Facetimes are coming up. More Sports Beat after this.
When I was your age, I was just like you, fascinated by stars.
Wow.
But now I get to search for life in the universe. And who knows, maybe life is looking for us too.
So we're like aliens to them?
Yeah. Does anyone want to be a scientist now?
I do.
Awesome. We need more girls in STEM.
Maybe we can find aliens.
Recently, I had a night to myself and chose to indulge in a little bit of nostalgia. With sports coming back with limited fans and bubbles, I just wanted to go back to the before time, live one of my favorite childhood memories. The Philadelphia Phillies winning the 2008 World Series. And as I was watching the documentary, I came to two realizations. One, we need to learn to appreciate greatness when greatness is on our team. How special players can be. You remember the greats of that team like Jimmy Rollins, Cole Hamels, Ryan Howard. But now looking back at that team and comparing it to the roster today, 8-year-old Eddie had it way too good. And my second realization is there are so many unique moments for fans in championship seasons. Guys like Chase Utley, Brad Lidge, Jamie Moyer, the fan favorites of course. And unexpected heroes like Joe Blanton's home run or a Jeff Jenkins pitch hit. Now if you were to tell Yankees fans in 2009 that maybe they had the greatest infield of all time, many would say, yeah, but what about this guy or this era? Or what about this moment in history? But when history's written now, that's why they were so clear that that's what they were. So I encourage you to, as a sports fan, embrace the nostalgia, relive your miracles, highlights, and be the best sports fan you can be as we enter into year 2 of a global pandemic.
Let's talk about some of the biggest moves in the NFL's free agency period so far. Let's start out right here in the Big Apple. The New York Giants made one of the offseason's biggest signings by inking wide receiver Kenny Golladay to a 4-year, $72 million contract. After a 3-day visit with the team, the former Detroit Lion was confirmed to be joining the Giants on Saturday, March 20th. Golladay will become a focal point of what has suddenly become a potentially dangerous offense in East Rutherford, as he will join the likes of wide receivers Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard, as well as a healthy Saquon Barkley, who will be looking to return to form after an ACL injury ended his season early last year. Giants offense will also feature 2 more than capable tight ends, with Evan Ingram returning to the team alongside the newly signed Cal Rudolph. The former Viking Rudolph might be coming off a down year, but for only $12 million over 2 years, the Giants added another potential weapon to their squad. The Giants aren't the only NFC East team to see personnel improvements on offense, however, as the Washington football team has a new starting quarterback in Ryan Fitzpatrick. On a short-term contract of 1 year, the veteran known as Fitzmagic will be thrown to a young crop of receivers, led by Terry McLaurin, alongside his old Ohio State teammate, Curtis Samuel, a new addition from the Carolina Panthers. With the team's young defense looking to take another step forward, the crew out of DC has thrown their hat into the ring of teams poised to crawl their way out of the black hole that was last season's NFC East. Another team looking to turn things around after a sub-500 season is the New England Patriots. Head coach and GM Bill Belichick has been on a spending spree in this free agency period, bringing in a number of high-impact players. Despite staying put at quarterback, the Pats have given Cam Newton a much-improved receiving corps, with pieces like Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry at the tight end spot, as well as the Raiders' second leading receiver in 2020, Nelson Aguilar. The Patriots' former star receiver Julian Edelman will also return after playing just 6 games in 2020, and the signing of outside linebacker Matthew Judon from the Ravens will bolster New England on the defensive side. A number of teams have opted to spend big on returning players this offseason. The Packers brought back Aaron Jones at the running back spot on a 4-year, $48 million deal, keeping them in the conversation for next year's Super Bowl. 8-time Pro Bowler Trent Williams became the highest paid offensive lineman in the league, as the 49ers brought him back for $138 million over 6 years. The defending Super Bowl champions out of Tampa Bay will bring back much of what brought them their second ring in franchise history, as they re-signed outside linebacker Shaquille Barrett, linebacker Levante David, and tight end Rob Gronkowski for a combined $38 million in annual salary, and they also placed the franchise tag on receiver Chris Godwin. I'm Mike Senatore, and remember to come for the Bears fan. They could use it.
The San Antonio Spurs finished the 2019-2020 pandemic-shortened season with a 32-39 record, finishing in 11th place in the Western Conference and ending an NBA record of a 22-straight season streak with a playoff appearance and a 22-straight season streak with a winning record. Heading into the 2020-2021 campaign, the Spurs were projected as the 22nd best team in the league. Their core of young players was ranked 14th, and star player DeMar DeRozan was placed 82nd on ESPN's list of top players in the league. Now, over halfway through the season, the Spurs find themselves within the 10th best record in the entire NBA. Their current 22-18 record gives them the 7th seed in the Western Conference, and a return to the playoffs if the season ended today. In a conference as tight as the West, the Spurs only trail the 5th seed by 2 games, with wins already over the Clippers, Lakers, Celtics, and Nuggets, while also pushing a Nets team that was in the middle of a streak where they had won 14 of their last 15 games into overtime. It is clear that the Spurs can not only compete, but beat anyone in the league. At point guard, the Spurs employ a young and rangy player in DeJounte Murray. The former All-NBA defensive second-teamer is averaging almost 16 points per game, along with 7 rebounds and a little over 5 assists. Murray continues to grow as a leader and floor general, while collecting the 8th most steals in the association. His partner in crime is sharpshooter Derek White. White not only gets it done on the perimeter, but has had a presence on the interior too, averaging 1.2 blocks per game, the most out of any guard in the NBA. On the wing is the man who currently carries the Spurs on his shoulders, DeMar DeRozan, who led the NBA bubble in fourth quarter scoring and continues to be one of the most clutch players in the league, and is top 15 in most offensive categories, including being second in the league in isolation points per possession, trailing only Kevin Durant. Not too shabby for the 82nd ranked best player in the league. Over at forward is second-year player Keldon Johnson. Nicknamed Big Body for his punishing finishes at the rim, Johnson is 3rd in offensive rebounds and 7th in total rebounds for all small forwards. And he had a big 21 rebound performance in a win against the Bulls just last week. And the big man in the middle patrolling the paint is Jakob Poeltl. Poeltl is 9th in total rebounding among all players and statistically the best rim protector in the entire league, with the Spurs having the least turnovers in the NBA and their starting lineup only commanding a total combined salary of $55 million. The Spurs are primed to cause your favorite team problems, not only now, but well into the future.
Unfortunately, that's going to wrap things up here for Spring into Sports Beat. I want to thank my panelists, Mike Senatore and Blake Waldron, for joining us. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hofstra SB. And subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch all of our episodes, packages, and whatever we got coming. Also, tune in on April 14th for our junior-produced episode. Until then, I'm Eddie Fitzgerald saying, in the words of my father, go, be good out there, go learn something. We'll see you next time.